Hello and welcome to the show. Last couple of weeks, as usual, as you know, I've been talking to people that make a difference in the world, and that's my focus right now in the new season. And one of those people is the country director for Islamic Relief, an organization that we all know is around the world doing the things that they do to make this world a better place. His name is Yusuf Patel. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Faizal.
Yusuf, it's interesting having you here because, as the country director, because I'm able to get a first-hand look at the information of Islamic Relief and the work that you're doing. I know that the brand is all over. People trust the brand. It's one of those organizations that, you know, if you put your finance there, it's going to go to the right places. But having got that reputation, that must have taken a long time to do. I know that you've joined the organization perhaps 2 years ago, but being there, looking at the history of Islamic Relief, where does that all start? What were the core focuses of Islamic Relief that brings it to the point where we find it today?
I think the values of Islamic Relief, that's a cornerstones of Islamic Relief. It's very focused on the values, and it's integrity. In terms of, you've got sincerity, amana, custodianship, integrity. You've also got values like compassion, rahmah, dignity, because we're serving people. We're not actually employed by Islamic Relief. It's the people that we're serving that we actually work for. So we need to be servants to the people that we most deserving. And I think that accountability and governance, that's our responsibility, not only to the donors and organizations and institutes that support us, but also to the people that we serve. We have to make sure that we serve them with excellence, we serve them with complete transparency, and give them the best of whatever we're delivering to them.
Now we see a lot of organizations that are doing relief work all around the world, and I think they're all doing good work, which is commendable. But Islamic Relief as a brand on its own is one brand that kind of stands up amongst the rest of them, with all due respect to the other brands. But it's one of the brands that I look back and I say that they are really making change. When I look at the news, then I see you guys are busy there, then you're busy there, then it's a flood there, and then it's a disaster this side, and you're kind of everywhere, doing everything. How do you guys cope with all of that? Because that's a big task on its own.
Okay, we're lucky in that we're part of a global family. Islamic Relief operates in over 40 countries worldwide, and we have what you call field offices and partner offices. So the partner offices are essentially fundraising offices, but the advantage on the field offices is they implement on our behalf. So if we, for example, South Africa are looking at a disaster in Africa, in most of the African countries, we've got offices on the ground. So our own family members, our own Islamic Relief family guys will actually implement the project for us on the ground. Like the recent Malawi floods, we've got an office in Malawi that makes sure that the aid gets delivered. Worldwide, there's about 6,000 personnel. It's including volunteers as well. So I think that's a great help in terms of actually getting the work done on the ground. We have looked at decentralization in terms of creating regional hubs. So in Africa, we have an East Africa regional hub, and that hub is based in Kenya, and that looks after a few countries around East Africa. We're looking at the Southern African regional hub as well. And like that, we decentralize so that the decisions are made quicker, and we can get to the ground quicker within, I think our mandate is about 48 hours.
Now that's an interesting one, because we find issues happening all around the world. You seem to respond to, from mudslides down to anything that's happening, from flooding down to poverty alleviation. And I think there's a range of things. If you want to take us through what is the exact responses that you go to.
Okay. Islamic Relief is an emergency relief and development organization. So we respond to the relief, like for example, in the Philippines, we still there now looking at the development side. So like that in most of the countries that emergencies occur, we tend to stay there and help the people rebuild their lives in terms of getting their livelihoods back. The responses range from the Philippines, the typhoons, the earthquake now recently in Nepal. We had a team from the neighboring India that actually accessed Nepal because the airport was closed. Access was closed within the first few hours. And our team traveled from India by road into Nepal. So that's just one of the, like on the emergency side, but you're looking at conflict areas where we've been working. In Syria now is going into the 5th year. We've been working in Yemen before this current crisis. So they've been working in Yemen since 1998. And there's about 400 personnel on the ground there. And that was mainly looking at the food shortage. There was a huge food shortage, and it's just alleviated now through the crisis. But we tend to focus on the development and getting people back on their feet in terms of getting their lives back and just to some normal routine after earthquake.
Now you personally have come from perhaps a business entrepreneur life. I think you mentioned to me you were in engineering, going and then dealing with issues like you are now, seeing the things that you see, coming face to face with the realities of issues around the world, disasters. For you personally, how has that changed your perceptions on this world?
I think I was living mainly, you tend to be focused just on your work and your business.
You're in that cycle?
Yes.
That daily cycle?
That's it.
Work, home, children, work, home, children.
You don't see what's going on.
It's the bubble. Previous show I spoke about it, it's called the bubble to me.
Yeah.
Yes. So you're out of that bubble. How does that change who you are?
I think just locally it's opened my eyes a lot, because locally what we found is just maybe not less than a kilometer from where you live, people just don't have food. They just don't have food to carry on. The economic crisis has hit them, but these are people that won't necessarily be out on the streets begging or looking for assistance.
They didn't need to.
And yes, and there's a whole economic crisis or economic pressure on them in terms of just meeting their daily bills. And then you have in the Western Cape, we have the schools that close now and then due to gang violence. You have shootings in certain areas. And I think we don't really, if you live in that bubble, as you say, we tend to bypass it. But when you're working in there and you see actually what happens, you realize that you're so lucky and that the small interventions can make a big difference. So children, for example, if we have to take children out of the poverty cycle, let's give them a proper chance to get out of that, maybe by looking after their education right till they can actually become something or get employment. So I think for me it's changed a lot, and especially outside. If you go into Africa, we've seen people that probably never ate meat for a few months. Water is a shortage. It's things that we take for granted in our daily lives. That becomes a major, and I think it just brings you down, right down to earth, and you realize that how much we've been blessed with in terms of just having a shelter, just having food to eat, and even in winter. I mean, for us, it doesn't really hit home, because we can put on the heater, but there's people outside, at home, in Johannesburg, Durban, Cape Town, and all over South Africa, but also outside as well.
Do you believe that the fact that as humanitarians, as people that are humanitarian, your staff, do you believe that that has a major role or plays a major role in your service that you deliver to the people?
Yes.
Because if you had ordinary staff working for you that simply checks in at 8 o'clock and checks out at 9 o'clock or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, whatever it might be, and that's where it ends, I very much doubt that you'd be able to achieve the things that you do. I feel that you have humanitarians working for you, and that's why the success of Islamic Relief.
Yeah, I think you're 100% correct. You have to have a passion if you want. This is not just a job, it's a mission. And worldwide you'll see
that's a sum up. It's not a job, it's a mission.
It's a mission. You need to be able to, it's beyond just that 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 where you come in, you do your work and you go back. You need to actually experience what's going on and that passion comes through in a lot of projects. What I've seen outside as well in terms of locally in South Africa, the people that are working, they have that extra care or that extra, I think it's that caring for humanity.
Correct.
You know, so that brings you through, because you need to be able to do that in order to work at Islamic Relief as well.
It is said that whatever you keep for yourself, you will lose forever, and whatever you've given to others will be yours forever.
Yes.
So effectively, whatever we retain on this earth, we will eventually lose that the day that we die and we leave this planet. But whatever we've given to other people and the time that we've given to other people will be accounted for in the after. So I think that you're truly blessed doing the job that you do, because you're doing work that it's your job, but at the same time, you're busy affecting that change in the world.
Yeah.
And I've been talking a lot about that change recently on the show, because if we all do that little bit of change, then this world could be a better place. There's enough suffering. It's the animals, it's the people. And there's a lot of things in this world that's not in order. And people like yourself go out there and you make that change. Going with Islamic Relief as the public, how does the public know that their funds are being channeled correctly, and what type of funds do they give you? Because I think that it's easy for people sitting at home watching the show to say, I'm not able to do what Mr. Patel does. I don't have the time. I don't have the energy to do what he and his team does, but I'm happy to sponsor that or pay for that. What's the channels one follows for that?
Okay, there's various types of funds that we accept. We accept Lillah, Sadaqah,
Can you
Zakah.
quickly give us a quick breakdown of those,
Yes.
those three?
Your Zakah is your compulsory percentage, 2.5% of what you have left over after a year. And that's
And that's mandatory, you've got to pay that.
Yes. And what our strategy and our whole core of Islamic Relief is also that it's not a favor that we're doing to people. It's actually the people that are doing us a favor by giving us a chance to be able to distribute our zakah to them. So there's a right in the wealth of those that have to the people that don't have, or to the most deserving. And that's the I mean, you need to view it that way. So it's not just
a very important thing
task.
I think what you're saying is that you are just a conduit
Yes.
for them, because they were supposed to, in any case, give that to the poorer of society. Sometimes they don't have the time and the resources to go out there and do it, or maybe the know-how, and you are the conduit for that. So you're actually doing to say it bluntly, you're doing everyone a favor by doing that.
And I think that's where our amana and the responsibility that we have is great to those that, because we act as this conduit, we need to ensure that the funds are utilized correctly. So we have screening processes, we have processes that ensure that the recipients, we actually refer to the people that we serve as rights holders. We've changed that term from beneficiaries to rights holders a few years ago.
Yeah.
So that, because it's their right.
Yes.
It's not, they're not benefiting. We're the beneficiaries.
Yes.
So we've tend to, in all our
I've altered that, and
literature.
that's the philosophy, yes.
Yes.
So, and you've got obviously checks and balances in place to make sure that all of that is happening in order.
Yes, corporate governance is really high on our agenda.
Whenever there's money involved, there's got to be corporate governance.
Yes, and it's full transparency, accountability. So our financials have been published, and we actually load it onto our website. So it's there for the public to have a look at and to question and come in and have a chat. And we've basically, besides the compliance, the normal compliance, we've got the ethical, and we've got the duty to our donors and to our creator to ensure that we make sure, that the funds are utilized correctly, and that the maximum benefit is derived out of the funds, so that all of us benefit in the end.
I want to ask you an interesting question. Something that came up early on in my mind was, how do you pull certain things off? For example, I'm involved with some little operations during Eid and Ramadan, in our own capacity with some little people and stuff like that. And it's always a mission. I mean, feeding the kids and the children, and it's a mission. I've got to order these things, do the thing, and then get volunteers to come and help and all those kind of things. So we know it's a mission, but that's on a small scale. You go out and you do this on this huge scale, and what always perturbs me is, I want to travel overseas, and the opposing government sits there and says, okay, you're coming to visit, so your visa will take a week and we'll sort this out and that, so you can come and visit Pakistan in this week. And I say, okay. Now, with you get there in 48 hours. You get all these things organized. You got the people, you've got the aid that's going out. You're going to the right places, and there are risks involved at the same time. How do you manage all of that?
Okay, I think it's more, it's been over 30 years. Islamic Relief.
You obviously know this is a task for anyone else.
Yes.
Yeah.
Worldwide, I mean, it's been established over 30 years now, so it's all that experience that they've put together, and the response wasn't that quick in previous years, but it's come down to that. And there's
governments know you.
Yes,
and I think that's
it's also there's a standard. So once an emergency is declared anywhere in the world, the emergency team gets together, and all the steps and the processes are followed as a checklist going down the line. In terms of who's the closest, if there's countries, neighboring countries, and we have personnel in there. There is some challenges, for example, getting into new areas. But because we belong also to we have consultative status with the UN, we belong to the international civil society organizations. So there's a lot of memberships that also assists in this. So you're part of a global network of NGOs, humanitarian actors that actually can get access to these areas as and when needed, especially when an emergency is declared. Locally, as you mentioned, it's a challenge in terms of doing the projects, but we have a system in terms of every project has a budget and a concept note, and there's duties assigned and responsibilities assigned to who's responsible for the project. We have a new system called the Geographic Information Mapping System, which we found, we've just utilized it over a year now, and we've mapped out all the poverty areas in SA. So we've taken our projects that we do locally and we've overlapped it with this. And
is this based on research data from various sources, or is it research data by Islamic Relief itself?
It's by us.
Right.
The poverty, and that comes from Stats SA.
Right.
And then our data that the projects that we do, we've just overlaid that out.
Okay, interesting.
So we try to have maximum impact on areas. Now, even on emergencies, we could map out the emergency area in terms of where the most people are trapped, for example. And that's at a more advanced scale where you work with the communication cluster that's formed in that emergency. And we could map out to see maybe there's access to roads that need to be cleared. Like in Nepal, we focused on clearing of the roads by mapping out maybe there's stranded people in a certain area and aid needs to get through. So there's the use of this technology as well that's integrated into your program, so you can you can be more effective and you can make a bigger impact instead of just going in uncoordinated.
Now, I know that maybe perhaps sometime you go in personally yourself along with some of your staff. Tell us about some of those incidences. You come into an area where there's perhaps severe poverty, or you go into an area where there's been a flood or a disaster, a natural disaster, and the person on the other side is distraught. They are taken out of their homes, there are things happening, they're losing family, they have nothing to eat. So when they see you and your team, that's the sign. It's the sign of relief, it's a sign of positivity. What's the responses like? What do people tell you? What does their faces look like?
I think that we also have like certain principles in terms of as a general humanitarian principles that we have to adhere to as well. We need to be aware of that. There's a principle called do no harm. So you need to be wary of a lot of things, sensitive to what they've been through, sensitive to the fact that
emotions.
Yes, child protection as well. Because what happens is also you've got vulnerable children. You've got, so there's a certain standards that you adhere to.
But it's like a code of ethics.
It's a code of ethics, yes. And the people on the other side, when they see you, you can't explain that smile or that little bit of relief.
So you go home at night thinking that, you think about that because you've done something.
Yeah.
And you've effected that change, and it was something that if you weren't there could have turned the other way.
Yeah, maybe I can share with you on a visit to Chad. We went recently, the beginning of this year actually. where we saw some of the water projects that we did. And this is like 400 kilos in the desert. So once that water is done and you see the little children playing around that water area, and the village actually, they needed to walk about 20 odd k's to get water before. And there's a simple thing, but you can see that they're active, they're energetic, and when you come there, the whole village actually welcomes you. They make a whole procession, waiting for you, and it's a whole festivity. They'll even and you feel, in a way, it's a contradictory, because you feel like
awkward, yes.
You feel awkward because
Yes.
they're doing this for you, but it's actually what you're supposed to be doing.
Yes.
But they're so generous and they're so heartwarming that you just feel so humbled, and so you actually, you don't want all that pomp and this thing, but this is their custom, and they see you as someone that didn't forget about them. So I found that very, touching.
Yes, correct. It would be, because in the end of the day, think about it. I think that the responses are just a manifestation of the fact that we take simple things like water for granted. But here you brought water to them. They perhaps don't need to walk 50 kilometers anymore to get that. So it's a big thing to people. It's a big thing.
Yeah, and I think also in that village, like when we sat down, then we look at what our intervention starts with. This is more on the relief and poverty alleviation side. It starts with the water project, and then around that we look at education. So it will be like a school, then there'll be a small health clinic or maternity ward, and agricultural project. In these areas we look at projects like micro dams, because we focus on disaster risk reduction and building the resilience of the community. So when there's drought, or when there's when there's rain, they can save the water in a micro dam, a simple structure that collects the water, that ensures that they can use it for the crops down the line. Yeah.
So you're looking at projects that's obviously, again, like I mentioned on a previous show, it's not about always just giving the fish. It's about teaching the fish. It's about creating sustainable development. So you put things in place there where people, that when you are out of town or out of the place, they can at least continue doing what they do.
Yes, like in Malawi, the floods at the beginning of this year have caused that most of the farmers have lost their crops, and they only get 2 gaps to actually recover their crops. So we're looking at sustainable development, sustainable livelihood projects for them. We've got a project in Malawi that was started with a water project and ended up with a fish farming project, and next to it an agricultural project. So it's a whole cycle, and that whole village actually benefits from your fish farming, from the agriculture, because the water from the fish farming actually feeds the agriculture. So it's a complete cycle, and that village is sustainable. In a place like Mali, and you've got the agriculturists and you've got the pastoralists, right? So what was happening was the animals were coming over and eating the crops. So the project we done there was we planted a plant called the sisal plant in between the two,
Right.
and got the communities together. So it's also engaging the community and preventing conflict, because most of the issues start from conflict as well, because these are tribes.
Yes.
And discussed with them, and now what happens, the animals don't cross over. Everyone's happy. It's not a artificial barrier between the two.
Correct.
And from this plant you grow, both communities benefit, because you can make rope from there, and lots of other byproducts from that plant. So that gets harvested and exported and sold, and then that's sorts out that community.
I think that's very interesting. Mr. Patel, just in conclusion, there are many people watching the show that would want to get involved. Sometimes they cannot get involved financially, but perhaps volunteers, that sort of thing. How do they get involved with you, and what sort of resources are also needed? I mean, sometimes I think, and I'm assuming, that it's sometimes doctors, it's sometimes this and that. How does people help you?
Look, we have, as you mentioned, it's not about, it's whatever time you've got. Sometimes it's not about just donating, it's about time and expertise, advice. So we have a volunteer, they can call into any of our offices in Cape Town, Johannesburg or Durban, and or go on our website and just basically send a request. So what will happen is they'll fall part of our volunteer network, and we'll basically have a discussion with them and see where their interest lies. So we try to match their interest to what they would like to give of maybe their expertise, maybe some time, and maybe just get involved in fun activities or challenges in terms of raising funds. So there is a whole avenue or aspect that's available to them.
Mr. Patel, it is nice having you on the show. We hope to have you back soon again, and we thank you for the work that you're doing for society.
No, thank you for having me on the show.
Thank you. Mr. Yusuf Patel, the Country Director for Islamic Relief in South Africa, telling us a bit about some of the excellent work that Islamic Relief is doing, not only in South Africa, but around the world, to ensure to assist them so that they can assist others. Thank you for joining us. Goodbye.